Hello, welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me, as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm good, mate. I'm very good. A bit exhausted after an exhausting weekend. Had two big local golf tournaments going on, plus Baku, so rushing around all over the place. But yeah, no, just Dexter's just taken me for a long walk, so I'm much better now.
Good man, good man, good man. Good to hear, Peter. There's a lot of F1 stuff, F1 centric threads at which we need to pull, as is compulsory. Peter, what do you think was the biggest story to come out of this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
Well, I think we're going to have to give a sort of dead heat finish to what would have been going through Carlos Sainz's mind as he stood on the podium looking down at the Ferrari lot. That was a moment to savor, wasn't it? Talk about, pivotal and emotional. He gets sacked and then he does. I mean, he's not the first time he's out qualified or out raced a Ferrari, but to do what he did that weekend, to finish third, both Ferraris nowhere, crashing into the walls, doing whatever they were doing. What a great thing for Carlos. And I just hope somebody at Ferrari was thinking we shouldn't really have got rid of that guy. He was pretty good alongside Charles Leclerc. And I think the other one, actually, to be frank, was the leader of the World Championship crashing into the wall in Q3, completely messing up the start, doing something that I haven't seen anyone do since Denny Hulme did that at the start of the 1963 or 464 Australian Grand Prix, it might have been, in a Brabham. Long time ago, you see somebody actually sort of jumping the start, then braking, and then he kept the engine running, to his credit. The whole field swarms around him. I mean, it was bizarre to say the least. And then goes off on the first lap. This is the leader of the World Championship. And, it's quite a big thing for a driver of that stature to make so many mistakes in one weekend. It's like one thing was just piling on top of another. And no doubt we'll be talking about that. But I think that's the other really big story, isn't it? Because how often do you see that happening either? Talk about, own goals.
Yeah, just a tad. Let's double click on Oscar's performance then this weekend, Peter, because again, leading into this weekend, he was setting records as far as his consistency. 34 races back to back, he'd scored in top 10. 44 races back to back, he'd finished in. Are we looking at a blip from Oscar Piastri then? Is this an anomalous circumstance, or do you think the pressure might be getting to him this, his third season only in F1?
No, I don't think the pressure's getting to him, and I think he's still the calm blackjack Brabham type driver we've been talking about all year. However, there's a difference between a street circuit and the preparation of a race on a street circuit to, say, I don't know, British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And I was struck actually on Friday morning when he had that problem. I think it was a hydraulic problem with the car, and he wasn't going out. Admittedly, the track was green at that point, and but nonetheless, it's a street circuit. You want to get into a street circuit very quickly, and you want to get into a groove. And there he was standing on the pit wall in the garage. And I was just struck by him not actually looking very annoyed. I mean, not annoyed, but he didn't look as if he was just the usual, happy, laughing Oscar. He realized that this was valuable time that was being lost. I think that's what he felt. And it was kind of mitigated then by that long delay when I think the curb started to break up, and there was a long delay. And by the time that was over, he was up and running again. So that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But then, was he playing catch up after that? It's going a little bit too quickly, too soon. On street circuits, always you let the circuit come to you, as we saw with, Max on Friday wasn't out there setting fastest times. And the grip picks up almost, by the lap, by the time you get to the weekend, putting aside the drizzle and the grease and the crosswinds. And so he got out of sync, I think, with the build up of the grip. And then there was that, weird thing where on the grid, I mean, putting aside at the back of the field, the two McLaren drivers were the only two on the brand new mediums. And it's so easy to say it, and people will say, "Oh, Windsor, typical, Monday morning quarterback or whatever." But when you've got a car as good as a McLaren, and it's going to be good on time management, it's going to be good in terms of balance and feel and general chuckability on a circuit like that, and you got both your guys in the midfield, for me, the last thing you would do is put them on the softer tire, new sets thereof, because the only thing you can do when you start them like that is basically you're saying to them, even if you're not saying to them verbally, you're saying to them subliminally, make the most of it off the line on the first few laps, get past these cars, get to the front of the race. That's what a new set of mediums actually says when you put them on the car, when they make that decision. For me, I would have said hards, absolutely for sure, for both of them, because the safe way to pick up track position, if you've got a very, very good car, always is to extend the stint. And they went for new sets of mediums. I think it kind of, Lando is not a driver that responds to that sort of thing anyway. He's not that sort of driver. Oscar is, he's pretty aggressive and he's a racer. And we saw that, obviously, overdid it at the start, I guess, just so psyched up in wanting to make a great start, anticipating the lights going out. And then past two cars, I think, before he went off, he's on the outside of Ocon going into a slow corner. And yeah, I mean, he used the phrase, I think he outbraked himself or did something like that. But the reality is that even a new set of mediums is not going to be fully up to tire temperature. And he got the other two cars going down the inside or just on acceleration runs. This one, he's on the outside. It was quite windy anyway. There's quite a lot of debris on the outside. If he'd been on hards, I think he would have said, right, just back off, just let everything settle down. But because he's on the new mediums, he's got to go for it. Obviously, the tires went up to temperature, locked the inside, and straight off, virtually the same sort of shunt as he had in Q3. So, terrible weekend. But in answer to your question, I think it's all bracketed by a street circuit in Baku. Now, it's not to say it couldn't happen again on another street circuit like Singapore, which is the next race. And if he misses the first half hour of Q1 and the weather's terrible for whatever reason, torrential rain or whatever, which you can have in Singapore, then it could all go wrong again. And McLaren just looked clumsy, didn't they? Compared with a lot of teams, they didn't look as if they really knew what they were doing when all the variables came into play and you had to choose what tires you wanted your guy on. I mean, they had Lando on. Where are we? I'm just going to look at this. Yeah, they had Lando on softs after running mediums in Q2, and then they put him on softs for Q3. Now, this is Lando Norris, and you think, well, that's no problem. But when it's very frenetic like that with a lot of reds and there's a crosswind and it's raining a bit, you want to try and keep the driver. You want to give the driver as much confidence as possible, obviously. And I thought it was quite interesting that Max was basically on the medium the whole way, apart from running the softs for a short run in the Q1. He was basically on the medium, which gave him a feel for the car on mediums. And yeah, he did the time on softs at the end, but really because he ran out of mediums. And I think he still would have been on a medium had he had the opportunity. And the only reason he actually got the pole was because he's just so good at managing all the variables, and it showed up in his driving. And he got it even on a set of softs, you could say. But with Lando, they didn't need to do that. They could have been more consistent, I think. And he didn't qualify well. And I know we want to talk about Lando, but we might as well talk about it, and then what a race. Just
unbelievable. Really. Let's just finish double clicking on Oscar first. I thought initially that sometimes you've got to extend a driver who's only in his third season in F1 some grace, and particularly since he's been Mr. Consistent season to date, and even going back further into 2024, you can do one of these, Mr. Windsor. You can chalk that up to the game. This happens. F1 drivers are human beings, and therefore they make mistakes. But then you see 2 days. 2 big incidents. Now, McLaren guys are saying that that's the first time they've ever seen Oscar Piastri take a corner off of his car, but he did it in back-to-back days. And not only that, Peter, in the race, he's made the full start. Now, if you've got anything about you, you'll be aware you're going to make a full start and get a 5-second penalty, but don't ease off or anti-stall and end up in P20. That's 2 mistakes back-to-back. And then he's yeeted it into the barrier again. I'm like, this is a difference in extents that we're speaking about as far as Oscar's errors of the unforced variety now are not kinds. That's incredible that he's done that. Some are speculating, Peter, that potentially it's on the back of him not being too pleased at the previous Grand Prix when McLaren asked him to invert. What do you make of that?
Well, on the way he reacted to the start, I think I don't think you can criticize what he did, because the minute or the millisecond in which he released the clutch too early and realized he had, the natural reflex is just a brake. And so I don't think you can criticize him for that. I mean, if he'd kept going, he would have been past the pole man by the time the lights went out. So, I mean, you don't want to do that. I don't think you can criticize his reaction having made that error with the clutch. But as for the rest of it, I can see a lot of Oscar Piastri fans, a lot of Australian fans, all the rest of it saying, well, it's only one race, give them a break, they all make mistakes. And that's absolutely true. And every driver makes mistakes all the time, really. And it's just that some make bigger mistakes than others. But the only thing you got to say above all of that is that he is in a McLaren. He's not in a Williams. He's not in a Ferrari. He's not even a Red Bull. He's in a McLaren. He is in the best car in Formula One. So even then, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make mistakes. But it does mean, I think, that you got such a good race car that you don't need to do what Oscar was doing. You don't need actually to have to push that hard if you're not that comfortable. And you don't need to pass 4 cars on the first lap, even if that new set of mediums is your thing, your trigger to make you do that. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's a very, very good car, the McLaren. And there's no doubt that had Oscar just kept going, even with the 5-second penalty, if he hadn't hit anything, he would have been what? I don't know, maybe third, probably. I would think might have caught Sainz. Yeah. So, all he had to do was just drive that thing well. And to me, it's still astonishing that Lando didn't do that. You could say, well, Lando didn't. But yeah, well, Lando didn't. What can I say? I said in my video many times, imagine if Max had been in Lando's McLaren. Do you think he'd sat there in the race like that?
He'd be down the road. You'd be down the road, Peter. Go on, then let's talk about Lando, because again, I wanted to extend Lando a bit of grace. I think he wasn't his best race weekend, but he wasn't as bad as Oscar. And then you come to find out, you spoke to this in your post-race review, Peter, the race restart. Like, what? It's a race restart. You know that Max does his little snaky thing and then tries to catch the pack by surprise. So why then, Lando, if you're out of position and this is your golden opportunity to gain some material points, bridge the 31-point gap that was between Oscar and yourself, why aren't you right at the back of the pack? The excuse that he gave post-race, Peter, was that he was tinkering around with brake bias because he knew going into the turn that was the most important thing. It's like, hang on, you're an F1 driver. Surely you should be able to spin 2 or more plates at once. What's going on with Lando? How did you characterise the performance, Peter?
I think it was all too much, really. I think he just went into the mode. I said that after my qualifying video. He was basically, in Q3, he was basically driving like other good Grand Prix drivers. He wasn't driving with that little extra spark that Lando Norris has over most of them. And I've been saying that for 4 or 5 years. He does have a beautiful touch. And when he gets in a rhythm, he's really good, albeit wide entries and not leaving much margin when he's really on the limit, although he does have that lovely ability to let the car float. That's one of his characteristics. But when the crosswind came in qualifying and when the drizzle was there, he just backed right out of it. And he looked like, I don't know, he didn't even look like Liam Lawson, really. I mean, he didn't look that good. He didn't look as if he was on the edge, sort of, really trying to get the best from the car. It was just like, what's happening here? And that showed up in the lap time. And then I think in the race, it was the same thing. I mean, as I said, the last person in the world you'd want to put a new set of mediums on when he's in a great race car is Lando Norris, because he doesn't respond to that sort of thing. He's not that sort of driver. He's very, very good, particularly after about 40 laps, 30 laps, let's say. And that's when he could have got right up into the top 3. But because they had him, he didn't maximize the mediums, the new mediums, and that showed up particularly at the restart there. And to blame it on faffing around with the brake balance is not enough, because, as you say, brake balance is a thing that should be just like at the fingertips, just do it. They know what they're doing. They should know exactly what they're doing. And he, as you say, eye on the ball, eye on Max Verstappen, 100%. The big news for Lando Norris is that this is an immense weekend now for him to score a lot of points that Oscar Piastri has just thrown away. This is a huge weekend for him. Doesn't happen very often. Kind of make up for Zandvoort almost. And he just drives around like an old woman, What's that all about? I don't know if we're allowed to say that anymore, but drives around like Dexter probably would have driven. No, probably a little bit better than Dexter. But but you kind of know that with Lando. That's why I say I was so surprised they had him on the new mediums, because I would have had him on a new set of hards, plenty of them, and then gone to the new mediums back end of the race when he could really have made good use of them. And it all just went spiraling out of control from there. And I think a lot of Formula One drivers are lulled into thinking that you can't really do any proper passing in a restart, and everybody just files in and it's too difficult. Well, got a guy like Charles Leclerc behind you, you need to be looking at your mirrors, mate.
Incredible.
Or Max Verstappen, the leader of the race, one of the two.
He's sleeping. Peter, is there something to be said for? I know people say the yips and that people get into bad habits. Is there something to be said for Lando at the start, whether it's a race restart the first couple of laps or a race start proper the first couple of laps, that, like you said, he drives like an old woman, like Lando takes too long, if past his prologue, to play his way into the crease, whereas everybody else, the likes of Max and Charles, they're on it, it's bang straight away, they don't need there is no warm-up period, all that's done outside of the cockpit, whereas Lando, brilliant, like you said, in the second, third, and final third of a Grand Prix. But those first 2 or 3 laps, it's like he needs to de-thaw. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it does look that way. And I think when he saw that it was Oscar in the wall, Lando's thought probably was, "Oh, I better be careful. I better not make the same mistake." Probably, whereas a Max would think, or a Nigel Mansell would think, or a Charles Leclerc would think, "Oh, big opportunity for me here now. Go for it, big time." They would. It's 2 different reactions, and I just think one of my great heroes when I was a kid was Dennis Jenkinson, the British journalist writing for Motorsport, who shared the Mercedes with Sterling Moss to win the 55 Mille Miglia. And so Dennis Jenkinson and others were saying the World Championship is ruining Grand Prix racing. And he always believed that. And when I started working in Formula One, I used to talk to him about that. And he'd say, "Oh, yeah, if these drivers, they're all thinking about points. They're happy to finish second or third. That's not what racing's all about." And of course, it sounds very old-fashioned to say that now, doesn't it? Everybody talks about it. "Oh, we've got to be in the points tomorrow. We're very happy with our points haul, 7th and 8th, brilliant finish, whatever." And I think, what would Dennis Jenkinson think of that? And I think, that was a little bit of what we saw with Lando. He's got so many points now. His races with Oscar, it's a difficult weekend. Oscar's hit the wall twice. He's already hit the wall. And I just think he just thought, "Oh, I'm going to have to look after the car, make sure I finish here, don't damage it." Instead of the Max Verstappen reaction of, "Yeah, this is the moment to go for it." And that is Lando now, I guess. He's a bit too... He's a Formula One driver, isn't he? He's a superstar Formula One driver, and not as much a racing driver as he used to be when he was in Formula 3, racing on double underline.
Lacking in purity, some say. And it's interesting hearing him after the fact, when Brooksy pitched at him, it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, and Lando was just dismissive out of hand. He was like, "No, it's not a missed opportunity. I did the best that I could do." And that's that. I was like, not quite, Lando.
Well, of course, from Lando's perspective, I think that's a fairly pejorative thing to say, because obviously from Lando's perspective, he felt and will always feel as if he did the best he could. And the Ferrari was quick here and he couldn't get past there, and Yuki Tsunoda had better this and better that. He will always think that way. But because he's Lando Norris, that's the world through the vision of Lando Norris, which is totally brilliant in his own mind. Not brilliant, that's the wrong word, which is totally logical in his mind. But if you look at it from the outside, you say, "What was he doing getting blown away by Yuki Tsunoda?" That's the reality. And I suppose a good question to Lando, a more intelligent question, would have been, where was the Yuki Tsunoda Red Bull quicker than you? And I guarantee if you'd asked him that, he probably would have had to think about it for a bit. Yeah. Which says it all. But I may be wrong. No, I don't think I am wrong, actually.
No. Now, Lando spoke about Tsunoda, saying that he felt that Red Bull have taken a step. That it's not just like you alluded to in your video, your post-race video at the Italian Grand Prix, Peter, that the floor and the floor fairing updates they are no joke. and they can expect to see performance upside, not just at Imola or as at last Grand Prix, but in going into Singapore as well, that this is now Red Bull, maybe not back on top, but very nearly.
Oh, for sure. If they're quick at Baku, they'll be quick at Singapore. And Austin, they'll be good at Austin because they're still not slow on the straight. They haven't managed to create more downforce by being slower on the straight. They're at least as quick as a McLaren, if not quicker. So Austin will be okay. I think they'll be okay here on in, to be honest. Wow. The big question was how they would go in Baku. And the minute you heard the tone of voice that Max was using after about 3 minutes of Q1 of FP1, you knew he had grip and balance. Wow, we got a race weekend coming up, and that's good news for everybody. All the fans out there, they're gonna love Formula One now.
1000%, Peter. That everybody's dialed back in now since Max Verstappen championship game on. Right. It feels like they can run the car a lot lower. Andrea Stella said as much, that the problem for McLaren wasn't all of the pit stop nonsense and mistakes of the unforced variety. The fact that they didn't give Lando or Oscar Piastri a race-winning car, that it's not quick enough, and to access the upper echelons of the MCL 39's performance, it's you've got to drive it. It's temperamental, and that's why you see OJP, per Andrea Stella, yeeting it into the barrier and Lando Norris's cheeky kiss. Let me talk to you about Max Verstappen, though.
But just on that point, though,
of course.
On what basis is Andrea Stella saying that? Is he saying it on the basis of the performance of the car, or is he saying it on some other basis?
I think Lando fed back that tracking Tsunoda-san, that he had no chance of overtaking him. It was because, therefore, Tsunoda-san's car, not because Yuki's not a bad driver, but not a good driver even, because he was driving a very, very quick car through some of those, particularly Sector 2. Lando said a sector around which you wouldn't expect the RB21 to be super quick, right? Short corners, 90 degrees, medium duration. That's not Red Bull territory, historically at least.
No, but the point I'm making is Stella's remarks based on what a very, very good short corner front end driver would be doing in a McLaren right now, energizing more than Oscar and Lando? Would everything he's just said about the car still apply? Which is my way of saying that be careful, because you've got two drivers who turn in quite late and are driving on the rear of the car. So to make sort of global comments about the performance of the McLaren, you run the risk of making changes that actually you don't need to make to the car. And that's the big problem when you've got two drivers like that. And I wonder whether he's taking all that into account. Anyway, that's just by the by.
I love that. Very good shout, Mr. Windsor.
If Yuki Tsunoda's going that well in that car now, it's about where he should be, isn't it? I think Sergio would have been quicker than Yuki had he been in that car, around Baku particularly. But it does show that the car's got pretty good levels of grip now. It's not that complicated. It's just more grip. That's what they've got, and they haven't lost a lot of top speed in getting more grip. That's all that's happened. And all the other talk is sort of doubled up. That's a good
lost in the round.
Max Verstappen. Yeah.
Do you think then, Peter, they'll go well Red Bull at Singapore? Because again, Singapore's another level of 90-degreedness and short corners, isn't it?
Well, you say short corners. I don't think there were many places around Baku where a good short corner driver like Max could actually shorten the corner. I don't think there were many. It's difficult to do that through those 90s. And then anyway, on a street circuit, you're kind of line locked into the groove anyway, because it's so slippery offline. But I know what you're saying. You're saying the corner doesn't go on for very long for everybody, is basically what you're saying. And I think, you're right. I think they're very similar. So it will be, and I think Max, through that quick section leading onto the pit straight, which is quite an important bit of road, we see some shunts there as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he drives that and what he's doing with the throttle and the brakes going through there, because it's a quick bit of road of the type you don't really have at Baku, which is a fast corner, which isn't completely flat, with a long straight that rewards how well you drive through the quick corner. So I think the Red Bull will be very good there. I cannot imagine in a million years that the McLaren won't be very good there as well, and without changing it at all. I think it'll be a very good car there, providing it's very well driven. That's all I'd say.
Oof. Interesting, very important caveat. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let's talk about the one that they call Maximilian Verstappen, because again, this is one of those ones where the community has been almost diametrically opposed views. In one corner, you have those Max Verstappen naysayers, not fans of the chap, who say, well, that's what Max is supposed to do. Like he's a 4-time champion. Give him a quick car, and of course he should put it on pole and do a lights to flag victory and complete his 6th Grand Slam, only now 3rd behind Jim Clark on 8 and Lewis Hamilton on 7. I want to say that's what Max Verstappen is supposed to do. But then you have other Max Verstappen fans who look at the qualifying session and say, well, hang on. He's beat Carlos Sainz in a Williams, mind, not the quickest car. But Carlos at that time when the track was dry, and Max Verstappen gapped him to the tune of half a second when the track was damp. What are we looking at here, Peter? Is he worthy of praise, or people being utilising too many superlatives about Max Verstappen now?
Well, no, I think the first point is to go back to this business of the Grand Slam. I assume at the moment you're not taking into account the Grand Slams that Jim Clark scored in the non-championship Formula One races. Is that right?
I think like for likes, just championship, just championship races. I think.
Wow, still a Grand Prix car, and it's still a Formula One race. Anyway, I'm being facetious, obviously. Let's not get too excited about comparing Jim Clark with anyone. Anyway. Going back to qualifying, it was an unbelievably difficult qualifying. And anybody that says, well, Mac, all he had to do was out-qualify Carlos Sainz, has then to explain why the Ferraris weren't there and the McLarens weren't there and the Mercedes weren't there. So that's the first thing. And secondly, it was, of course, the rabbits always go out first because, well, why not? Go out and do a lap time. Who knows? It might work, might not. Safety car, rain, whatever. And the quick guys always wait till the end, as late as they possibly can, because the track's getting quicker, which is why Carlos and Liam Lawson and Hadjar were out then. And good luck to them. They did a good job. Carlos did a good job. And by the time Max was ready to go, it was raining. And then they stopped, because of the shunts. The red flags. And when he went out, the track was not that quick. And he went out on a set of tyres that he'd been on mediums virtually throughout, straight onto softs, different grip feel. And he had one lap and it was slightly wet. If anybody says that wasn't one of the greatest laps ever driven, then they don't know what they're watching, because that was a superb lap under pressure for Max. And as you say, he was 0.59, I think, quicker than Charles. I mean, all credit to Liam Lawson, because he almost beat Sainz in those conditions as well. Did a really good job. And I think part of that was keeping him on softs throughout. And he had that level of consistency of feeling the grip of the tyre that he got to know well. And that's why Kimi Antonelli did a good job. He's on mediums throughout. And more's the shame that Lewis didn't do a better job, because he was on softs throughout. And I think that consistency was an important thing to give the driver when you got so many other variables. Unless the driver's Max Verstappen, who can deal with the variables in a way that, and I was shocked here that Charles Leclerc couldn't deal with them. Max did a much better job in the crosswinds than Charles Leclerc. And that to me, that was shocking. And because I never imagined that would be the case. I always thought Charles, at that level with that pressure, would always be in the sort of Max class of crosswind management, but he wasn't. And maybe that says a lot about the Ferrari and how on edge they are with that car. But yeah, I thought Max's pole lap was just incredible. One of the best things I've seen all year.
So what is it about Max Verstappen then, Peter, that enables him to kind of, you can see him on the lap and he's almost doing this iterative steering. He's almost like a traction limit / grip sniffer dog. He's almost what is it about Max, Peter, that enables him?
Sergio Perez lookalike. No, because I think he learned a lot from Perez on that. He definitely improved in the way he puts the power down on circuits like that, Monaco, Baku, Singapore, from Perez. Perez was doing a better job for a while, for a sort of small window, which Sergio, bless him, then sort of magnified into, I'm going to win the world championship. I'm much faster than Max Verstappen, yeah. But for a little window, just on one part of a driver's technique, i.e. how you actually use the throttle against a loaded rear, Perez was showing Max up. And I think Max learned from that. And now he's as good as Perez, for sure. You're very, very good on that. But what you're seeing is Max always having the car square to the road. You see him just turning into an apex with just the right amount of steering. And that's tip of the iceberg of what he's doing with his footwork. And it's tip of the iceberg in terms of how he's getting into that specific transition point that you're seeing and rotation point. And that's all to do with the first half of the corner. The rest of it, driving from what his rotation point has become on that specific lap at that specific moment with that specific amount of crosswind and that specific amount of grease on the white lines. After that, he's just straightening it to a point he's looking at. And like Fangio, he's just missing the wall by that much every time. And everybody's saying, oh, wow, look at his judgment. But it's not that you could do it, Cameron. It's not that difficult. You start the car at a rotation point, look at it and just drive to it and go. The key is to be at that rotation point as quickly as he is. That is the key. It's not the exit. It's the key. It's the entry to the corner. And then none of that shows up on the onboard. None of that shows up because we don't have the footwork synced to the steering. We don't have it synced to proper camera angles in which you can actually see what he's doing and how he's different every lap based on what's suddenly happened, or based even on the reality that he's a human being and he's not always going to hit the brake pedal exactly the same way at every corner, let alone every lap. It's always going to be slightly different. There are always going to be variables in there. And you say, how does he do that? Well, he does that because it's in his blood. It's in his fingertips. It's in his nerve endings. He was born with it. His dear mom and dad gave it to him. And he just has it. And the beauty of Max now, the Max Verstappen we have today, is that he looks after that. He doesn't wrap it up in cotton wool, but he looks after it. He doesn't have a crazy life. He just simplifies his life as much as possible. When he's not in a Grand Prix car, he's probably in a kart or some sort of Porsche going around the Nürburgring. He's very simple. He just dilutes everything down to just looking after this incredible God-given talent that he has. And he doesn't think about it that much. He just knows what he needs in order to be quick. And he rings up Paul Monahan, whoever the boys are, or girls, and says, look, I've thought about this, and Singapore turn 5. I'm going to be able to just get the car in the way you want, give me as much traction as you possibly can out of there, and keeps it to a simple level like that. And everybody else gets quite complicated, I think, because they try to blend their ability not being at Max's level with some sort of shortcoming in the car that the engineers might be able to fix. A little bit along the lines of what Stella was just saying. And that's why they sometimes go around in circles. And if I was McLaren now, I would say, do not touch anything. After one race, do not touch anything, because they don't have Max. They don't have a driver of Max's quality in either car. So any feedback they're getting actually isn't real. That is the point. And no team would ever like to admit that. No driver would ever like to admit that. And the system in Formula One always is to react to what the driver's doing. But if I was running that thing, I would say, don't touch the car. Leave it exactly as it is. Apart from the upgrades they have in the normal course of events, making the car quicker in a couple of areas, but don't make changes specifically because of what happened in Baku.
Yeah. Anomalous circumstance. Just double clicking on the Max thing, Peter, before we move on. I'm not sure. I've been watching F1 nearly 40 years now.
40?
And I'm not.
I'm about 31. How can you do that?
Yeah. But I've never seen, Peter, someone. I think it's the sensitivities of his internal gyroscope, right? You always speak about bravery is not necessarily an entity in Formula One. It's all about anticipation. And he gets there, and he's 4 chess moves ahead of the game, right? Checkmate in 4 or 5. It seems like he's just... I don't know, Peter, it's weird. It is weird. Everyone says that I'm too effusive in my praise of Max, that he's got a quick car underneath him. But he's doing something very different now to almost anybody else, including Lewis, anybody else that I've ever seen, as far as his ability to combine his brilliance, and he's almost metronomic now, inevitable in his ability to execute and bring the best out of himself, like you said, in the match points in the Wimbledon finals, the points that matter most. He's just I've different, Peter. I don't understand.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think he's reaching another level now, and part of that is I've always, for many years, I bracketed Max, Charles, and Lewis very closely with one another. And in 21, I always had Lewis and Max identical, really, in terms of the level they were achieving. And Charles sort of sniffing around there. But as this year's progressed, for whatever reason, I think Charles, and we saw that in Baku, we can't just write it off. It happened, Charles made a massive mistake under pressure in Q3. And so therefore you have to say, right, there's something going on now with Charles that isn't going on with Max. So Max suddenly has got Charles dropped down a bit in that sense. And then there's Lewis with all the dramas that he's got at Ferrari, and is he driving as well as he used to, and are the brakes suiting him and all that other stuff. He's dropping down as well because of that, which kind of leaves Max on his own now. And not is he on his own, but he's getting better all the time because he's being self-critical, and he's never, ever lost that unbelievably savage, hungry urge that he has to win every race. No. And that's showing through more and more and more. And he's controlling it in a way that is awesome to watch from the outside and must be incredibly daunting if you are the driver following Max Verstappen. And he's doing his job. He's creating his art, I think, as well as anybody ever in the history of the sport, I would say. I'm not exaggerating in any way. And for the people that say, oh, well, he's got a great car. Well, look at the races when he didn't have a great car and see how well he did. That's the point. And he wasn't that good. The car wasn't that good at the start of this year. No. And look at what he was doing with it. And still he was wringing the best from it. And because of that work and because of how well he drove when the car wasn't great, now the car is good again. It's a bit like Nigel Mansell in 92 when he finally gets the active right car. It's all relatively easy for him because, well, yeah, no problem. How many? I've got 3 minutes to go. One lap. Track's greasy. New set of softs. Used softs. Haven't really tried softs. What are they all about? Oh, I'll do a lap now. I need to be on the pole. Do this. And what he doesn't do is allow all the emotions then to come into his thought process. His thought process is still exactly what it always was on the mediums, which is feel the point at which I can get the car into that rotation, come out of the brake pedal pressure, a bit of understeer, get the front steering moving a little bit more. It's all those things. I'm making them up, obviously, but it's kind of along those lines, just feeling the car, reacting to it. And because he's doing that, he's got this sort of 20% vacuum that he can use for adrenaline, for aggression, for using his brain when it comes to strategy, time management, all that stuff's in this nice bubble that he's allowed himself. Nothing to do with sports psychology or anything like that. It's just that he's got more brain capacity to think about it because his driving is happening in a sort of very scientific way that's just all related to inputs that he's feeling, dynamic weights that are constantly going on. And that's why he always sounds pretty calm on the radio. He gets a bit frenetic when the car's terrible, but he's always pretty calm. And it's a joy to watch. It really is.
Just driving Miss Daisy, isn't he, Peter? Do you know what I mean? Leisurely Sunday drive. It's watching.
Well, it may look like that from the outside. I mean, if any of us were, if we were privy to his footwork, I don't think we'd be saying that.
No,
because it's not fast. I mean, I did a piece with Rob Wilson just the other day, and Rob made the point that you don't have to have very fast footwork. Footwork doesn't have to be fast in order to be correct. A lot of it is patience, and where you might see a Yuki Tsunoda hitting the throttle a little bit sooner, Max will be just off the throttle, just letting the car settle, and then you'll be just feeding in the power, at exactly the right rate. And a lot of it is that. And when you watch him on board, lap after lap after lap, it's amazing the number of moments when he's not on the throttle and he's not braking that hard either. You can just see him just setting the car up perfectly, and then as soon as he's got the angle perfect, he's off. And yeah, it's different. You can see a little bit from the onboards when you can see the steering, but that, as I say, that's tip of the iceberg of what he's actually doing in the car.
Yeah. It looks and feels and smells a little bit different. This Max Verstappen fella, he's not bad.
That's the understatement of the year, Cameron.
It's not bad. It'll go well. I think when all is said and done, I mean it's where he goes on the Mount Rushmore of F1, not whether he goes there. Methinks, but I don't know. The naysayers will continue to bark up that tree. Let's talk about Scuderia Ferrari ever so quickly, Peter. It felt a lot like, with my Sir Lewis Hamilton cap very firmly on, it felt like Lewis was progressing. It felt like converging upon Charles Leclerc's times in absolute terms, at the very least during FP1, 2 and 3. Felt like finally we're getting to see seven-time champion, GOAT Sir Lewis Hamilton, 2020, prime Lewis Hamilton. That's what it felt like. And then all of a sudden we get to qualifying and it's like, ugh, out of Q2. How much of Sir Lewis Hamilton being out in qualifying, in terms of culpability, do you lay at Scuderia's door, and how much does Lewis Hamilton have to just take it on the chin and say mea culpa?
Well, don't forget he hit the wall in FP1, didn't he?
No, but it was a confluence of different things. I mean, Charles went off right in front of him, brought out the yellows, so that ruined his first lap on softs. But should he have been on softs in the first place? Wasn't mediums the option? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, on Friday, I think everybody knew that the medium was going to be a great tyre, and they're trying to save as many mediums as they could and put them on the soft. But all I'm saying is he hit the wall, so we shouldn't get that carried away. Yes, he was very near Charles and sometimes ahead of Charles. And yes, he did a very good job with tyre management in the race. He had the better strategy in the race, which was to start on the hard and then go to the medium. As a sync from Charles, we started on the medium and then sunk like trace amongst the traffic. So it was a difficult race for Charles. But you're asking how much of Lewis not making Q3 was due to Scuderia Ferrari. And let's have a look at what he ran.
Just in context, Pete, the only reason why I say that is, again,
he ran softs throughout, which is a good thing. Sorry to interrupt, but he ran softs throughout, and Leclerc was on mediums. I have to say, I don't think it was Scuderia Ferrari.
Really?
No, I don't. I think it was doing a lap under pressure. We've seen it many times with Lewis this year. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of pressure. There's 1 minute to go. He's not in the top 10. He's in the bubble. And yeah, there will always be a reason. It'll be traffic, or the tire temperature went off, or whatever it was. There'll always be a reason. But looking at this, he was on a new set of softs, and was he second? He went from used soft to new soft, and I think he should have got into Q3.
I mean, if Charles doesn't go off in front of him, so softs have only got 1, maybe 2 laps max. So you're almost setting it. I think Scuderia have to take some blame, if only because they know that Lewis isn't necessarily in his prime. This isn't 2020 Lewis Hamilton, or even 2018, or even 2007 Lewis Hamilton. So then the best efforts to set him up for success and not failure. So why you've got him in this narrow operating window, whether he almost wins it and gets through to Q3 on the first lap on softs, or he's in a world of pain and trouble and ends up going out in Q2. I think you can do that with Charles Leclerc because he's in his pomp and his prime, but Lewis is 40 and it's like, just put him on medium, surely. And that's what he asked for.
Yeah, but you're talking, and the way I spoke about McLaren and their choice to put both drivers on new mediums at the start of the race. And 6 of one, half a dozen the other, it really is, because if you've got him on a small window of operation, the upside is you're giving him more grip. And, if you wanted to read the mind of his engineers, and you wanted to read the mind of Freddie Vasseur, you would think they would probably be thinking, he's hit the wall once and he's going to be under pressure. We want to give him maximum grip for this last run. Is that not what they would be thinking? Now, Lewis may have thought, I want the medium, but there's another little argument there, which is Baku was quickly shaping up into a qualifying session where it was quite good to have consistency from one compound, from one session to the next, and keep the compounds the same. As Alex Albon made the point when he hit the guardrail on the apex, he said, switching from one tire to another, it was quite difficult with a different grip. So I don't know, I think I hear what you say. I think it was such a tiny point of discussion. It would have been, it should have been such a time, but really, I don't think there was a correct answer there. Apart from retrospective, is it going to be a traffic thing? Is he going to have a car going off in front of him? Is he going to have a free lap? how can you predict those things? And if I said to you before Q2, for sure, I know Lewis is going to be on a free lap. When we send him out, it's going to be on a free lap. Do you want him to have absolute maximum grip on a new set of softs, or do you want him to have medium just in case he makes a mistake and needs another lap? What would you have said?
I think just because of the context, I think I'd go in isolation as you've couched it, Peter. 100% softs, I get it, but just because Lewis is struggling, he's having a bad time, but form's not the greatest, and again, this isn't the first time that he's not getting out of Q2. But Baku being the track that it is, there's always yellow flags, and you may always need to do another lap. I think I might have wimped out and given him the safe option, give him what he asked for, which is the yellow labelled medium compound tyres, in case Charles Leclerc or anybody else goes off in front of him, and he's got to go round again. You want tyres that have a little bit more life in them than the softs that are done after 1.5 laps.
As I say, it's 6 1 half and dozen the other, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe in retrospect they should have run the medium, but not running the medium, it wasn't a way of trying to hurt Lewis. It was obviously a group of engineers putting their heads together and thinking this was the way to go.
Yeah.
And so it's such a semantic point. I don't think it's worth dwelling on it that much. I mean, more significant is that he didn't make it through to Q3 and therefore had to start yet again in the midfield, which is, he's used to it by now, sadly. But up until the end of 21, he wasn't particularly used to it. But he is used to it now. He did a job actually staying out of trouble and beating Charles and maximising the tyre combination that he had, and he can come home from Baku thinking, as you said, I'm up there with Charles. Let's see how good the car is around Singapore. Should be good around Singapore.
Yeah.
Should have been good around Baku, to be honest.
It feels like, again, to use Lando's
Charles should have been top 3 in qualifying for sure.
Let's double click on this then, Peter. As brilliant as Charles is when he's had his Weetabix, point to point, some say the quickest driver on the grid when he's ready. Why does he keep eating? Why does he still keep making so many mistakes? Is this just Charles Leclerc in his final form, and he's so quick that it's almost the cost of doing Charles Leclerc business that sometimes you're gonna flick your head up and it is going to be Charles Leclerc in the barrier? Is that just what we're dealing with now? Has Charles Leclerc got more travel? Is there more development to be done so he can filtrate out for his mistakes of the unforced variety?
Well, as I've always said, when you compare Charles with Max, as a physical, natural package, I don't think there's a lot of difference. I think the God-given talent that Charles has is very similar to Max's, but he's had a very, very different career from where he was born, the part of the world in which he was raised, the whole environment of Ferrari, the emotion. He's an emotional guy anyway, compared with Max. That's one thing that has to be said, much more emotional. And in that emotional life, he's had some terrible tragedies with which he's had to deal, and dealt with them incredibly well in a very mature way. Amazing. I don't know how he ever dealt with them as he did with his dad and Jules and Antoine and other things. And all of that is wrapped in the whole emotion of being a Ferrari driver and then before that a Ferrari Academy driver. And all that is quite difficult. It's quite emotional and difficult, and there's always something going on. Whereas Max has had this sort of very linear, clean career from karting, Formula 3, Formula 1. Yes, there's a lot of controversy around him often, and yes, there's a lot of pressure around him, but it's a much cleaner line that that he's been able to live and walk on, really, cleaner piece of road than Charles. And I thought, incorrectly, obviously, that Charles was kind of through all of that, and that causing the sort of errors occasionally we see from Charles, or quite frequently actually. But as I said, I was completely shocked that he did that in Q3. If he'd done that in FP2, he did go off in FP2.
Yeah.
Well, he hit the wall, didn't he?
Run off.
If it had that sort of shine in FP2, I wouldn't have been shocked. FP3, I wouldn't have been shocked. Qualifying, when he's got a real chance of being on the front row, probably, let alone top three. I was absolutely staggered that he did that.
Insane.
And he said crosswind, they said crosswind. And I suppose that has to be factored in, that the Ferrari is probably more sensitive to crosswind than the Red Bull or the McLaren. Well, not McLaren, because they went off as well. But let's take McLaren out of it then, because that's another subject. Well, let's say the Red Bull. And that could well be the case, the sort of how they have to run the car and downforce and so forth. But Charles should be on top of that.
He should be
throwing away opportunities like that.
Yeah.
So what does that mean going forward? And Lewis now, having had a relatively good race, relative to Charles, that is, at Ferrari, even though Ferraris in general were terrible. What does that mean? It means he's got to assert himself in Singapore. And we know how quick he can be at Singapore and how good Ferrari can be at Singapore. And if Charles, so the pressure's on Charles again, and there's going to be a lot of emotional Ferrari stuff around. It's annoying probably from his point of view that it's a 2-week break and it's not just back to back, because he'd like to just get on and get to Singapore and change the way things look at present. And all those things will build up. And so Charles will be thinking, Singapore, got to assert myself within the team, no mistakes, no more mistakes. And Ferrari should be capable of winning Singapore. And all of that's quite difficult to put together. So the best thing he could do is go and hibernate somewhere and or do a few refresher days with Rob Wilson. I say refresher, he's never done any days, but just doing the odd day in the rain with Rob at Donington wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Or Hethel will be even better, probably. and then go to Singapore, just with a very clean, clear brain, and trying to get out of as many sponsorship and media functions as he possibly can, and leaving that to Lewis, and just going in and being Charles Leclerc around Singapore, which he'll be super quick if he is, and not allowing all these other things to come into play. Max never has to do that because he never allows them to come into play anyway. That's the difference. And all he's doing is phoning up his engineers, chatting to the mechanics. He's just being a race driver who loves racing and loves driving. Whereas Charles got all this other stuff he's got to sort of chip off in order to get down to the real heart of what he loves.
Lots of extracurricular activities from Charles, the ice cream and the business and the esports, and I don't know. So it's a shame for Charles. Very quickly, as we round third base, Peter, I want you to speak to George Russell again. Often overlooked, comes into this race weekend at Baku with a respiratory issue. Very, very sick. Takes off his helmet and looks like he didn't even need to be driving. He looks in a bad way, but yet and still fights his way to second step on the podium. What do you think about George Russell? Often overlooked, but again, deserves his flowers now.
Absolutely, and I thought he was superb in the race, and superb really in the build-up to the race, given his physical condition, which was obvious looking at him. And just a real pro, if that's the right word. It's an old-fashioned way of saying this guy's a class act. And he is, and he was, and he did a great job. Kimi Antonelli starting to put pressure on him on circuits where he looks really good. I've always said he looks good on slow corners, even medium speed corners, fast corners. I think Singapore, that last section may help George elevate the gap a bit over Kimi, because it's very, very quick there going into before the pit straight. Singapore, that'll be a good George Russell bit of road. But superb drive by George. Mercedes, they got there, didn't they? P2 in the end with George. It was a good race. You got to say it was a pretty good weekend for them, and they did a good job managing Kimi, keeping him on the mediums throughout. It had consistency in terms of grip level. And, George, if anybody was going to understeer off into the Tech Pro barriers twice, it was going to be George Russell, given his physical condition. But it wasn't. It was the leader of the World Championship in a better car. And George Russell in the Mercedes, not as good as a McLaren, was very, very good. He was there at the end of the race, which is where both McLaren drivers should have been at the end of the race, if they'd had a different perspective on where they were going.
Very well said. He's not bad, that George. If rumour is to be believed, and you see Max in a Mercedes in 2027 alongside George, that will be very interesting. Finally, Peter, there's a lot of driver silly season going on, and rumour is that Isaac Hadjar will get the seat at the big table Oracle Red Bull Racing next year alongside Maximilian Verstappen. On the back of Liam Lawson's performance, a lot of F1 aficionados saying that he was the driver of the day, holding off all and sundry behind and wrestling that Racing Bulls car to a place that probably didn't deserve on pure pace. Do you think Red Bull might be making a mistake by promoting Isaac Hadjar alongside Max Verstappen as opposed to Liam Lawson?
I thought you were going to say they're all saying that after his drive yesterday, Yuki Tsunoda should keep the drive, because he actually did a pretty good job, didn't he? As Max's number 2, that's about what you want him to do. Just take points from Lando Norris, which he did. You know, what more could you expect him to do? So don't discount that as an option as well. Obviously, Honda no longer with Red Bull next year, so unlikely to continue. But we should give Yuki some credit for that. He did a good job. I think, this is one race where Liam has looked really good, and Isaac Hadjar, by his own admission, interesting to see that. Self-critical, admitting to mistakes he'd made over curbs and things that he did that annoyed him, and Liam didn't make the same errors and got away with it, and good luck to him. Yeah, once the race was underway and Liam was in P3 like that, what he had to do then was just keep it on the island, and they're all driving a little bit under their own pace, obviously, because it's the race. And they had to run the race well, manage it well, make no mistakes, and they did that. But the key to Liam's performance was what he did in qualifying in the closing seconds of Q3. That was a moment when you thought, whoa, this guy is really quick. Not that that's ever been a question. He's always had phenomenal car control, and he's always been a driver that, in slightly odd conditions, providing he doesn't make a big mistake, is going to be really quick, whether it be crosswind, drizzle, intermediates, whatever. That sort of situation is always going to favour Liam Lawson, because it's the way he drives. He loves driving with the rear of the car. Now, whether or not that means, we got to have him instead of Isaac Hadjar, who's a much more of a front-end driver and will get more from the front of the car. If it was me, I probably would actually go with Liam Lawson, because it's the other end of the spectrum to Max Verstappen. And I've always said that is the best combination you can have. You've got your very, very good, the best front-end driver in the world, and then you've got one of the best rear-end oversteery drivers in the world in the other car. And that's a good combination. I think, as I said, that's one of the problems McLaren have, is that both drivers now, Oscar's not developed that ability that he initially showed to be able to shorten corners and drive with the front end. He's driving much more like Lando, but not quite as smoothly. A bit more spiky is the right word. And all they're getting is the feedback from that sort of driver now at McLaren. Whereas at Red Bull, they're kind of getting it, because Yuki's kind of where Liam, in the Liam end of the spectrum, whereas Isaac would be more towards Max.
Oof.
So if it was me, I would actually change course and I would go with Liam. No, wow. I think second time round, he'd probably be more circumspect as well. And he wouldn't be so, wow, I've made it, I'm a big star. He would be a lot more, take every day as it comes and do the homework.
Yeah.
Be yourself, providing they let him stay that way. He's a very good counterpoint to Max Verstappen with his style of driving.
Interesting.
And Isaac could do another year at Racing Bulls and do very well there. Very, very well. And then who knows, Isaac's more of a Max replacement than Liam is. But I don't think he's the right guy necessarily to have alongside Max in that respect. People may say, well, that sounds like rubbish, because if he's going to be the next Max, you want him to learn from Max. Well, listen to what I just said. You don't actually want him to learn from Max, because you want a driver, in terms of developing the car, you want to have drivers at both ends of the spectrum. Mentally an approach to racing, you can of course learn from Max, but you can learn that from Max by not being in the same team.
Yeah.
If you're in the B team, you can still learn from Max. Go and take him out for a pizza periodically.
But they want themselves a diversified driver pairing portfolio.
That's what that would be me. If I was running Red Bull, I would definitely, or any team, I would always want that. Always want. That's why Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet were so good as a combination. That's why Alan Prost and Senna were very good. They were not similar drivers in their style.
Yeah.
And I suspect, Moss Fangio, probably. Graham Hill, Jim Clark, another one. Very, very different drivers in terms of style. The more you have the difference, the better for the engineers in developing the car.
You get two lots of
Mario
feedback.
Andretti, Ronnie Peterson, another great combination.
Oof. I think it's a good shout, Peter. Whether they'll
Nicky
do
Lauda, Clay Regazzoni. We can go on. Alan Jones, Carlos Reutemann.
Oh, look at that. You're just showing off now, Peter. Look at
Well, no, I'm just saying these are combinations which were successful, but successful also because they had drivers at different ends of their ability spectrum. And that's a very important point. And that's why I never understood why they wanted to replace Daniel Ricciardo with Oscar. It didn't make sense to me. Nothing against Oscar. He's super quick, but he wasn't the right guy to have alongside Lando.
I think, it's hard to turn. If Oscar is the next generation of driver, it's hard for me to argue against signing him. But if we are couching the conversation under the umbrella heading of getting the best out of Lando, optimizing for his performance, that I agree with you, especially when you hear, he had a point talking about alluding to sabotage pit stops, didn't he, Lando? He said, listen, I don't know why it's just my side of the garage that can't all of a sudden do pit stops 5.1 seconds, 4.5, 3.5 seconds, 5.9, and then 4.1 seconds have been his latest pit stops. All not very good, but he's getting a little bit distracted, is Lando, potentially.
Yeah, well, if you start thinking about things like that, it's a rocky road. You've got to just put that out of your mind. In the days of 8-second pit stops, when there were far fewer people on the car and we didn't have the nuts and the guns and everything else, the golden rule was your quick driver always comes in second because you want the team to be the first driver in. That's their warm-up sort of thing, and then they're going to be on it for the second one. That was always the golden rule. Doesn't apply anymore because it's just like that. And you either make a mistake or you don't. It's nothing to do with it. You warmed up. And I think I made the point, and with you on live stream, but I made the point that I think it's crazy. We should be going to longer pit stops. If people want more overtaking and more variation, we should go to longer pit stops, fewer people on the pit wall, maybe 8-second pit stops, more chance of things going wrong, and more cars just sitting stationary like that. A lot of people will say, no, those microsecond pit stops are Formula One's DNA, and we therefore should not get rid of them. But I think that would be a step forward. But I've got a question for you, Cameron.
Sure.
And that is that if Max goes on to win the Drivers' Championship, which McLaren driver will have had the most points taken away from him by the other McLaren driver?
Oh.
You see my point, where I'm going with that.
I think season to date, I think it's got to be Oscar, right? It's the
Oscar's taken more points from Lando.
No, I think Lando's taken more points from Oscar. I think it's the inversion. I think it's so. I'd go back to the British.
Sorry, I'm going to add a complication now.
Go on.
Compared with the situation if Daniel Ricciardo was still at McLaren. If it was Daniel and Oscar and Lando and Oscar, and Lando and
Lando
Daniel
would be gone clear. Yeah,
exactly.
He would be gone clear. You make.
And so what I'm saying is, in signing Oscar, they never thought if it's a drivers' championship, it's going to come down to a few points, and it's Max Verstappen we're racing against. We've got to make sure we maximize the points for our driver.
Yeah.
So they've allowed the two drivers to take points from one another, and that's the biggest thing that Max has going for him now. Between now and the end of the year, obviously things can go wrong. It's going to be very difficult for him to continue to win races at McLaren's expense as he did in Baku. But one thing he does have going for him is that the McLaren drivers are going to continue to take points from one another. Yeah. It's not just one driver like a Michael Schumacher at Ferrari that he's got to beat. And that's a very important point. And that's why I keep saying, Zach, show us your master plan.
What master plan?
Yeah,
Mr.
right.
Windsor? Yeah. One does not exist. What is this master plan of which he speaks? A unicorn?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Peter, you've been
and for Max, it's obviously it's not easy, but it's not complicated, is it? He's just got to try and win every race and make sure that he's ahead of McLaren's, really, and win as much as he can.
So he benefits now from a singularity of focus.
Yeah, of course. But he also benefits from a car that's not bad and a Yuki Tsunoda that might be able to beat one of the McLaren drivers periodically, or a Ferrari, or a Mercedes that might beat a McLaren.
Oh, wow. Double whammy. Bring on
Yeah.
the next 7 races, Peter. Quick pick from you, mate.
Hmm.
Singapore. I don't think we'll speak between now and then. To save a dying puppy, I need one name for the race winner, Singapore, in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, well, I did. I mean, my heart says Charles. My brain says Max, actually.
Yeah.
I think I think the car is capable now of being as quick as a McLaren on a street circuit like that. I'm not saying it would be as good as a McLaren around Austin. It won't be far away, but I think Austin is a circuit where McLaren will be really good. It's still a great car, the McLaren, despite what people are saying. But I think around Singapore, Max can make up that deficit as he has done. A little bit. It's a much smaller deficit with the way he just runs his Grand Prix weekend. Start slow, build up, particularly on the street circuit. He's so good at that.
Yeah.
He's so good at gauging the track grip change and just blending in his performance with the way the track is picking up grip. He's never ahead of the track, or hasn't been hasn't been yet. He's never quicker than the track allows him to go.
For what it's
You could
worth,
say about Oscar Piastri or Charles Leclerc.
Mr. Windsor, the experts in inverted commas, of course, have Lando Norris as the current betting favourite. Maximilian Verstappen is second. Yeah. Because he goes well around Singapore, doesn't he? Historically, Lando is a bit of a
Why do they
specialist.
think he'll be quicker than Oscar Piastri around Singapore? I don't get that.
Recency bias, because Oscar yeeted it into the barriers. Surely, I don't know. I don't understand.
I think after Baku, I think Oscar will outrace. I think he'll be ahead of Lando in Singapore.
Oof. I can't wait, Mr. Windsor.
I can't see Oscar having 2 terrible weekends in a row.
No.
He's too good a driver.
It's unlikely. And
a lot of it will be qualifying, and I think he'll out-qualify Lando around Singapore.
And on that bombshell, Mr. Windsor, you've been more than generous of your time, as per usual. If you guys, as I do, enjoy yourself some purple sector, no market-leading insight from the legend, the goatiest F1 journo and F1 mind to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor, go and follow and subscribe and like and comment to some videos on the Peter D. Windsor YouTube channel. If you enjoy listening to your F1 content, it is the Short Corners podcast. That's the pick to click on your favourite podcasting platform. Follow 5 stars. If you are listening to this on a podcasting platform, then similar, please. If you're watching it on the YouTubes, like, comment and share, por favor. Mr. Windsor, you've been an absolute legend as per usual. I appreciate your time and your God tier level insight. Ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.